Hello. Excited to be here today with you. Welcome, Dawn L. and the Embodied Oracle Show. And I chose a really fun topic because is softness weak? And so that's what I want to talk about today. And it may be like, what does that even mean? What is she talking about? And in order to talk about this today, I wore a bold red lip in my leopard print or whatever this is, because I was like, this is such a fun topic for me. How are you? I hope you've been doing well. And okay, so this topic came up for me this week for a couple different reasons. I was listening to this amazing podcast, actually by Aubrey Marcus, which got me thinking about, in the podcast, they were talking about masculine and feminine dynamics, and they were talking about just all sorts of stuff that like really got me thinking about femininity, softness, and all that kind of fun stuff. And one of the reasons it came up for me is because I was recently having a conversation with somebody, and she was telling me she has a close friend. So this person's my client. I won't give her name out, but we were talking, and she said she has a dear friend who wouldn't work with me because from what she knows of me, she hasn't really experienced me too much. She said, she's really soft. She's so soft and feminine, and I guess ooey-gooey or something. I don't know. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, what a compliment, and one way to see me as soft and feminine. And does that mean that, if I'm soft, that I'm not going to be able to, because this woman happens to be really in her masculine. And actually the women that are most drawn to work with me are like the high achieving, like women that are kind of operating still in their masculine, more so than their feminine. They're like leaders, running companies, all sorts of stuff, like really just successful women, very prominent women. And so I was kind of laughing because I was like, well, I get it. I get that. And there's a way to be soft and approachable and warm and loving and still be a badass and still be really bold and resilient and like hold all these different dynamics. And so because this woman thought that, I thought, this is a great topic, because women are taught to be, we're indoctrinated into this society where we're supposed to be in, our masculine in order to succeed. And I don't know about you, but I know plenty of women who've lived out this energy. Melissa, hi, gorgeous. Thank you. And when we're overly focused on one side of masculine or feminine, because the truth is we have both essences within us. It doesn't matter what gender you are. This isn't about gender. This is just that we have masculine and feminine energy. And if you're a woman and you are ignoring either one, right? Doesn't matter if it's you're ignoring your masculine and you're all in your woo and feminine, or if you're in your just whatever dynamic you're playing out in, if there's an imbalance, it's going to show up in your life. And for me, following, like when I first came out into the work world, when I first was doing all the things I was doing before this life that I've been mentoring and doing soul and body leadership, before that, I was in corporate. I was hustling. Woo! I was out there. I was forcing myself to do all this stuff and make my sales numbers and do all the things and stay up late nights and take doctors out to dinner, because I was in pharmaceutical sales at that time, and make the money and do all these things. And it was very much from this masculine, like produce, make stuff happen. I got to like climb the ladder. Like even think about that, like climbing the ladder. It's like, so like, oh my God. And what wound up happening for me from just doing that and not really working and allowing my feminine to be a part of how I showed up at work. So your feminine, being very receptive and intuitive and flowing and like ease. And I was intuitive, but there was no room for like flow and ease because I was had a sales quota to make. And I thought that success meant that you were making a lot of money and owned properties and traveled and did all these things. And so I was like living in this paradigm where everything about me was more in my masculine energy, which also translated to me being shut off from my feelings. So I was really shut off, and it's almost like I was like completely disconnected from my physical body. So much so that like I was really struggling at that time in my life, and I was in a relationship. I was married, and I had no ability to access my truth. I just knew I was unhappy, but I didn't know what to do about it, how to feel, like, what was going on with it. And thank you, Melissa. And I wound up getting really sick, because when we're disconnected from our physical bodies and our intuition and our flow, a lot of the times the side effect of that is that we get ill. And so I was having migraines and stomach, all these things, right, were happening to me because I was literally rejecting my feminine. And I could go down a rabbit hole here, but like I was rejecting my feminine because in a lot of ways, I think I was rejecting my mother, like some of the mother energy that I had from my past. On an unconscious level, of course, I associated some of that feminine energy with like feeling crazy or emotionally messy or, all the things. And so where in your life might you right now be rejecting one or the other and overly compensating in some way with your masculine or feminine? And for me, the journey, once I was in that period of my life, it was like a season of my life. Speaking of seasons, it's the fall equinox today. Anyways, I wound up realizing that my body was breaking down and that I was forcing myself to do all these things, and I was out of alignment with my soul. And I had to get in alignment. It took me years, you guys. Like people talk about, oh, I got back into, I got in alignment and I'm living my best life. And it's like, people don't talk about what it takes to actually get to that place. There's so much bullshit on social media that's like, oh my God, look at me living my best life. And it's like, part of being soft, and that's where I'm at now. I want to say the journey, like the journey's not always shown. The journey for me took time. And in order to get to the softness of my heart, there's a whole lot of stuff that happened. But the truth is, a lot of stuff is happening for people behind the scenes. And the softness that people perceive from me is because I've been through a lot. I mean, I've been through a lot. And I know you probably have too. I just don't talk about it online. I do in my groups, all my coaching groups. Like my clients know me intimately. I'm very much into intimacy. But I always talk about it all online just because some of it's, private. But the truth is, when we're going through this journey of trying to, at one point if you're overcompensating in some way and you're masculine, then you are going to feel like you have to be like a hard ass, and you're going to have to like, and it's like, it almost reminds me of like, it's like such a penetrative energy, like the masculine, right? It's like everything's fast and hard and, ooh, I got to get this done, and ooh, I got to show up for this and everything. I lived like that until I couldn't. And then, you think of pendulums. It's like the pendulum, a lot of times it swings to one side and then it like might swing to the other side and then it comes down. And for me, the pendulum was I kept trying, and, I kind of like backed a little bit away from my masculine, but I kept trying to survive in corporate America and do all these things. And it wasn't until I became a mother that my journey with my feminine really began. And I was initiated like in a kind of like almost a shock, because it was like, oh, wait a second. I can't just like force myself. And, when I became a mother, I was also starting my business. I went from doing, at that time it was intuitive healing sessions on the side and then going into full time. And I was trying to do all that and like breastfeed all night, do all these things and start my business and network. And it was like, oh my God, like what? Like, and I just remember I wound up coming down with Epstein-Barr virus because my body was like, hey, bitch, like you're not treating me well. Like, what are you doing? And I still hadn't gotten the message fully. Like I had accessed more of my feminine. But I was still, and you know, the funny thing is I'm reading people for a living, right? I'm in my intuition, I'm accessing it, but it was all up here. It was all my third eye. It was all channeling. It wasn't an embodied energy where I lived from my physicality of reading, you know, and being intuitive. You know, there's a difference. So if you feel me on that one, if you're like, I don't know what she's talking about, maybe you do. But it's like one thing to intellectually be like, oh yeah, I'm channeling and I'm receiving information, but to actually have your whole body be the vessel to receive your intuition, because you know what you're feeling, you know who you are, you know your whole body is the biggest part. Your body is also the part that holds all your trauma. So you know that your physical body is the antenna for all your intuition, right? So anyways, the journey, you know, up until maybe, I don't even know how many years ago it was, I was realizing that I wanted more of my femininity. You know, I wanted to be in my body more. And the crazy part is at that time I was in a relationship where I had kind of had to turn down my sensuality and my femininity because it wasn't safe, let's say it like that, in that relationship. And I wound up getting out of that relationship and then discovering my true feminine essence. And it was interesting because I realized through all the things that I've been through in my life, and maybe this is for you too, like when we go through a lot of difficult situations, whether it's physically, emotionally, mental, whatever it may be, you got two options. Two. One, you're going to like be the victim and hold on to the past and be like, okay, this happened to me and I'm this person. Or you have this option to move forward, to alchemize the past, and to continue to live with an open heart. And the more you've been through, the more empathy you have for other people. The more compassion you have to understand, like, wow. You know, like I used to think until I realized I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, I used to think, what's wrong with people that don't just leave? What's wrong with them? Like, why don't they leave? And it took me being in that space to have compassion and realize people don't leave situations like that because of their wounding and their trauma and their past, right? So when you really start to feel and do the work on yourself, doing the work, you know, like actually doing the work, it takes time, and it's a lot. But you have this choice to say, okay, do I want to like keep looping on the past, or do I want to choose my future? And do I want to live with an open heart and react to life from that place? Or do I want to be like some persnickety person and be constricted and so defensive that I can't access my feelings, which is your feminine? And when you start to step into the higher archetypal energies of the feminine, there's a reason why it's like the maiden, the mother, the crone. And there is another one in between. They call it the enchantress, which is where I'm at in my life. It's when you're not making babies anymore and you're not quite a crone and you're like owning who you are. But anyways, I digress. The whole thing with the mother, right, is that you have love for people. You have tenderness in your heart. You can be soft because you realize you're a boundaried badass when you need to be. If we're always walking around like having to be defensive, it's because you don't trust life. If you trust life and you trust yourself, you have the ability to have an open heart and just know when something is a sacred yes or a F no. And you guys have probably heard me say this a million times over. Be generous with your no's and selective with your yeses. You know, like, and so when you start to come into balance and union with your feminine and masculine energy, what starts to happen, and this is what started to happen for me, is I had to heal my relationship to the masculine first because I was overcompensating. And like without going into a million stories, I was overcompensating due to my past, due to my wounding, due to the fact that my father, bless his heart, was an alcoholic at that time and wasn't able to like really be the masculine space for me when I was a little girl. So what do? My whole life I'm chasing after, and I become the man. I become the man that I never had. And then I don't trust my being in my feminine because I didn't even, it's like a whole long thing, right? So we all have our reasons that we're operating the way that we are. So when I look at a woman who's overly in her masculine, I don't judge her and go, "Oh my God," but I know it's trauma. It's repressed trauma. Because the truth is we all can be soft in certain ways and loving. Even men. That's not even allowed though, right? If a man's soft, it's like, oh my God, he's a wussy or something. Like men don't even, like I feel bad for guys right now because they don't even know how to behave anymore. It's difficult. But the thing is we're meant to have union within ourselves of a healed masculine and a healed feminine. And there's a dance, right? Between those two. So when I'm in my business, I'm operating from a place of I have my masculine part that is the structure, that is the stability. That's the part of me that knows how to make money. That's the part of me that structures my schedule. That's the part of me that is boundaried like a mother futurist. That will be like, if somebody is messing with something in my business, I have no problem standing up and being like, no, that's not how that works. No, that's not. I have no problem when somebody says to me, this is like such a silly example, but somebody asked me today and it was kind of funny. She's like, do you work on weekends? I'm like, no. There was years ago when I first started my business, if somebody asked me that, I'd be like, oh, am I kind of like, should I be working on the weekends? Like, should I? No, I don't work on the weekends. No. It's not even a big thing, right? But it's just this whole part of me in the past that was people pleasing. So the point is the masculine for me in my business shows up when it needs to. And then when I'm with my clients, I have this part of me that's soft and tender, but bold and dynamic and shows up and is like a truth teller. But I can do it from a loving place because I have softness in me, because I have softness because I love myself. I have learned to mother myself. I have learned to heal that relationship. I do not reject my mother anymore. I do not reject the mother in me. I have healed that part of myself. And so therefore, I'm able to have compassion for myself. I'm able to love myself when I don't show up in my fullest integrity in my life. I'm always moving towards right action. So when you have this healthy dynamic, you're able to operate and know exactly on demand what part of me, not is it my masculine or feminine showing up? No, I mean, that's like, I'm using that for an example, but like what part of me needs to show up to this conversation or to this thing in order to make this happen? In order to be the most embodied, full, integrated version of you. And, the reason that we're so disconnected, truly, is because of the programming. We've been taught, women have been taught, like, you're not allowed to be, a sexy siren and make money because women will hate you, or or you better act like a guy in order to be respected, or be non-emotional. And it's like, sometimes like there's opportunities in my business where I was at a retreat recently and there was something so touching, so incredibly touching, that I literally started crying. Like, and I'm one of the leaders of this retreat. But yet my heart was just overwhelmed with love and just a feeling of like, oh my God. And I found myself, like, the client, one of the participants was crying and I started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I showed my humanity. I showed the tenderness of my heart. I was soft in that moment because I trust myself. So the point of all of this is, when you start to trust yourself, you have capacity. The way I could say this is, if you're wounded and you haven't done the work, you don't have any capacity. That's why you're a hard ass. Because you don't trust life, you're defensive, you're scared, you're in fear. You might even be in scarcity because you're waiting to be screwed over. You're waiting for somebody to hurt you. You think that the world is out to get you. You are a victim. You are in perpetual victimhood. And you don't even realize it probably. Because you don't have the capacity, because you haven't done the work to heal your past. So you think life is happening like right at you, like somebody's out to get you, versus like, oh my God, my life is happening for me, for my evolution, for my joy, for my happiness. When you start to do the work, as painful and challenging as it can be sometimes, you start to realize like, oh my God, the more open my heart is, the better my attitude, the better my reactions, my perspective, how I show up on a daily basis. And that's when the doors start opening for you. That's when there's synchronicities. That's when life is dancing with you in the most joyous way. As cheesy as that sounds, it's the truth. Because you're at a high frequency. Because you have the capacity that when something shitty happens to you, excuse my language, when something happens, you don't just fall apart and be like, oh my God, this happened to me. What am I going to do? Like, life is, and believe me, you guys, I have pity parties some days. Every time something really challenging happens to me, I give myself, depending on the severity of it, like at least one, I give myself one pity party day. Like I'm like, crying, like upset, maybe tell a person or two the story. And then I stop. Done. I wake up the next morning because I know that my perception of the reality I'm creating, I know that God is divine, source, energy, universe is loving. I know that when something difficult is happening in my life, it's because something's being rearranged and shuffled so that the higher timeline can drop in. My humanness is like, oh, I'm scared sometimes. And then my higher self's like, girl, we just got to ride this ride. Loosen up. Have some fun. What's the joyful things that are happening in your life? I don't sit there and go, oh my God, like, oh. Because I tell you what, miracles start to happen when you're relaxed and you're trusting. You're trusting the intelligent space that this life is created from. So when you meet the resistance, the divine fluctuations of your life, right? When something's happening and you're like, oh my God, why is this happening? And I'm in it right now in my personal life. I'm not speaking from a vacuum and saying this. I am living this. I just don't share all my stuff. But when something happens that feels like a setback to me, I stop and I pause. And I say, oh my God, something must be being rearranged. I don't know what's happening. If I just see it through my physical eyes in the 3D, I could be like, oh my God, this isn't working out the way I want. It's not the case. Because if you're futuring and you're seeing what you want, you know that what is not in alignment with your highest reality is having to shift out. It's changing up so that you can get where you want to go. So that means you have to have capacity to receive the reality you desire. And if you falter and fall down and stay down every time something difficult happens to you, that means you don't have the capacity for the brilliance that wants to enter your life. I know that doesn't sound that's probably not what you want to hear, but it's the truth. Because it's how you react to life is where your frequency is at. It's what you're sending out into the quantum field that's going to come back to you and create your reality. So if difficulty is happening, bless you, because I know it's difficult, it's challenging. But see it as, instead of like, why? Oh my God. Just like, what's being rearranged for me so I can walk into my thing. And if I believe that things are being rearranged for me, then I'm not going to hold on so tight. I'm not going to contract. I'm not going to get hard. I'm not going to be on edge. I don't have to fight so much for my life, because, oh my God, if I don't fight for this, then I'm not going to get what I want in my life. That's the old paradigm, you guys. That is like the masculine. It does have that aggression and they do fight, but you don't have to fight for everything. Because if you're in your feminine and this is for men too, we have innate magnetism. And the magnetism just pulls to you that which you desire when you are a vibrational match to it. So the capacity part of this is that the more that you can hold the ups and the downs, that means the more you can receive, because you are not blocking life. You're not pushing away when something doesn't show up the way that you want. You don't have a tantrum. And boy, I do have tantrums sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I'm very impatient. I was like, God, did you not hear me on my timeline? I wanted, no, it's like, but it doesn't always work like that, right? And so when you want to have your tantrum, give yourself a timeline. Be like, you know what? I could have a tantrum for half a day or a full day. And then I got to move on. I got to move on. I got to like focus on what is going right in my life. And I'm not talking about spiritually bypassing you guys, because I don't believe in that. I do trauma resolution work in my coaching. I don't believe in that at all. But I believe in emotional mastery. And emotional ninjas let themselves feel, and then they pull themselves up and they get on, right? They like go, okay, I'm sad. But in my sadness, I can still show up for my life because I have the capacity to do so. In my, anger, I could be angry. I could be processing something that happened to me that was not maybe in alignment with my boundaries, but I still have the capacity to show up for my children or my clients or whatever it is. I have a mom, bless her heart. Hopefully she doesn't watch my YouTube channel. Where when she gets emotionally overwhelmed. And so when something happens to her, it's like, boom, she's out. She has no emotional capacity because she hasn't done the trauma work. And she is my reason why I do the work that I do with women. And so when I watched her be laid up every weekend for so many years in my life, sleeping and depressed and anxious, whatever she was going through, bless her, I didn't understand, like what's happening. I didn't know what was happening to her on a personal level, of course, because she's my mom, and there's that distance of like, not understanding it all. But I remember just like wiped out, and I was on that path too. Maybe you're on that path. Maybe that's been a part of your journey too, is like looking back at your life and going, oh yeah, when I was going through that situation, it wiped me out on the physical. Because that's when you are out of alignment. When it's not just emotionally, it's like your physical body's like, hey, I can't do this anymore. So I want you to think about today how you can soften into the truth and the essence of your fully realized being. Not your masculine or feminine. You as a soul. Like, how can you take better care of yourself so you have the capacity and the resiliency to deal with this life that's very challenging sometimes, and to find the joy and the beauty, and to live with an open heart. So if you see it from that perspective, you realize softness is not a weakness. It's actually a freaking superpower. It means that you're living with an open heart, and it means that you are going to be blessed in ways that in the moment sometimes it may be like, oh gosh, I'm trying to take the right course of action, but this feels difficult because this person, a lot of times when you live with a soft and open heart, other people can't meet you there because they haven't done the work. But you're not showing up in your life from a place of expectation of, oh, this person needs to meet me, right? You're showing up from that because that's what makes you feel good. It's because of what you've done for yourself. It's because you have compassion. And if people did that more, we wouldn't have as much addiction. We wouldn't have so much violence and crazy stuff happening in this reality, because people would be more balanced. So I'm going to get off my soapbox. Thank you for listening. I just wanted to share that. And, I think there's not like a 1, 2, 3, like, how are you going to fix this? This is more like just have like contemplation about how are you showing up in your life? Are you physically ill? Are you emotionally drained? Are you still forcing and hustling? What would it look like to extend some presence to yourself which is the masculine, right? That's presence, like being there, holding the space. Hold space for yourself. Start to tune into your emotions and feelings. Because I know for me, I'm wildly emotional. Once I lived by myself as an adult, you know, because I was in relationships, but these last couple of years I lived by myself with my daughters. I have an amazing boyfriend, but he lives in Boise. We're going to be living together. But right now we're in separate places. And I've noticed my emotions can be wild sometimes. But in my level of, in trying to, work with my emotions, I see them. And sometimes I just observe them. I just hold space for myself. I don't make myself right or good or bad, right or wrong. I just go, oh my God, wow. I have a lot of emotions happening in my life right now. How can I be with myself? How can I love myself? How can I not let this take me out? How can I be with myself so that I can continue to move, to grow, to expand, to evolve, and live my best life, which is what we should all be creating. It's what I'm creating. It's my invitation to you. That being said, I have a great program that I'm starting in October. It's called Destined with Donnell. I'm so freaking excited about this, you guys, because I'm going to take a small, intimate group of women, create like some really massive, beautiful community with these women. I do that. That's one of my superpowers. And we are going to think about, what are you destined for right now in your life? Where do you want to be at the end of this program? And with all my expertise, and I have this thing called the reclamation process that I take women through. It's like a little bit of psychology, spirituality, and my coaching. I create this very customized, unique way of serving my women, and I get them to the other side, because I am a channel and I am a healer, and so I can see all that stuff, but I'm also highly trained, so I've been trained in attachment work, constellation work, trauma resolution, I've trained in all that stuff. And so I have a little bit of woo and a little bit of psychology, and, I love coaching, and using futuring. Because I want to move you away from operating from just seeing life through the lens of your inner child and into seeing it from the lens of your inner elder, that future part of you that's already created the life that you want. So we tune into her. So if you want to learn more, I'm going to attach a sales page later today. But it is just for a small group of women, because that's how this is meant to be for this one, because I want to give lots of time and attention and energy to the women who are ready to change their life, and not have it be lip service, and not show away from the fact that we might have to do shadow work or look at some of the patterns in your family or whatever we need to do to get to the other side. I'm prepared. So anyways, message me. Send you guys so much love. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll see you next week for the Embodied Oracle Show.